Night school.
Night school.
Night school.
Night school. I like how you did that. You're just like super cool about it.
Night school. Night school.
All right. So what I wanted to talk to you guys about today was Jordan Peterson's ideas in his book, not Maps of Meaning, 12 Rules for Life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of.
You've also seen all the Maps of Meaning lectures.
I've seen all the Maps of Meaning lectures. I've seen 4 of 12 biblical stories lectures that he does.
Mm-hmm.
Read the 12 Rules for Life book. But it's not going to, I don't want to make this like a summary or like a point by point on the book.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of want to talk about Jordan's ideas, and I want to work out, I have an issue with the church, the modern Christian church.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what it is, and it could be multiple things, and I could be wrong in having a problem with it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just trying to figure out what's going on, and how come listening to Jordan's stuff made me become a better person versus just going to church every Sunday and because I was pretty involved in the church, so it's not like I was just slacking, but that didn't make me a better person. Like, I didn't feel like I was making progress versus I come into Jordan's stuff and I can feel like I'm coming more in line with God.
Mm-hmm.
Versus in just the church itself, I didn't feel like I was getting more in line with God.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I was trying to seek God, because that's what I was trained to do by my family. But the church wasn't trying to seek God.
Mm-hmm.
And so for some reason, there's like a disconnect there. So I've been making a list of just kind of points that I'm bringing up. But I think I need to give you guys like a before and after context of like where I was, where I think I was, and then where I started to develop through Jordan. A little testimony, I guess.
Cool.
In
Awesome.
Christian words.
Yep.
So basically, from the day I was born to about when I was 18, I grew up Christian parents, and they raised me in the Christian religious. I don't know if you can call them ideologies, but just mythical stories.
Mm-hmm.
And so they take them as literal truth. They actually happened. Everything in there was literal, or at least. But there's the funny part too, because it's like some parts they make them like meta and the metaphorical, but they pick and choose which ones they are, and not just my parents, but everybody that I kind of have associated with. They're just like, yeah, this stuff actually happened. This stuff, it's actually just like an allegory.
Yeah.
To mean something else, right?
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a little weird. So I'm trying to figure out how to, make the Bible as coherent as possible, because there's some contradictions that I see a lot of times that bother me, but I haven't written them down. Anyways, so I grew up in that world of don't say the Lord's name in vain, because he's real. It's like Santa, he's watching you. He's making a list, making sure you're naughty or nice, right? And it's like a lot of, like, if I had like anxiety or stomach issues or something, and I felt kind of like antsy or worried or concerned at a certain period of time or whatever, it tended, instead of me thinking, okay, maybe I need to take Pepto-Bismol, or maybe I need to not eat crap or work out or something, I would think maybe a demon is attacking me, so I need to pray it away. And so my mind would go into that kind of, everything was a defense against the spiritual world, which was only the devil and his demons, his minions, versus God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus, and all the Christians on the good side.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was a separation between us and them, which felt, when I got to this point where I was like, okay, this is kind of strange, which was around 18, is when I started feeling kind of really strange about what I was believing, and I guess I'm just going to bounce back and forth between how I was and how I think now.
Sure. Yep.
But basically it was like, I used to think it was us and them. Like, it's the Christians, and we're trying to do right, and we're trying to do good, and for the most part we're pretty good. I never really thought about it, but I was just like, yeah, we're all good people. And then there's the secular people, and they're not good. Like, there's some secular people that are good, and they don't believe in God, but they're kind of cool people, but they're kind of anomalies, and they're not going to go to heaven. But they might, I don't know. But we're just going to lean towards they don't go to heaven, because they don't believe in Jesus. But as I got deeper into the scriptures and, started questioning things like that, I realized that it doesn't make sense that there's us and them. And it makes more sense that there's a singular consciousness that is among all of us. And so then there is no us and them, because like the Bible talks about how Jesus came for everybody. And he's trying to separate, he's not trying to have it so that there's Jews and then there's Gentiles, but that we're all co-heirs with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's weird that we're all co-heirs with Christ, we're all part of him, part of his kingdom, but yet we're still separating Christians and secular.
Mm-hmm.
Physics, science, and mythological stories, religion, and stuff like that. So I think that's weird. And so when you were talking about like the union of the Hindu ancient stories and physics as we know it, like I think there's something like that in Christianity that needs to happen as well.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure how, and I'm not sure where. Talking back to the separation. So that's weird. And so I don't know if you guys have any thoughts about that topic, about how come, if it appears to me that Jesus wants unity among his people,
Mm-hmm.
but yet the Christians that I've encountered today, and maybe my lens is just not, maybe I'm viewing people through a certain bias that is making me see them as us versus them.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's not actually how the majority of Christians think or whatever, but why do you guys think that maybe there's that tension of like, there's us Christians, there's our tribe, and there's their tribe?
Mm-hmm. I consistently criticize people who consider their... So like we reviewed Mere Christianity on the podcast a few episodes back, and I felt like C.S. Lewis was trying to argue that Christianity is true instead of trying to argue that Christ is true. And I think that pattern is really similar not really similar, but really common in Christianity. Like, as soon as because the early followers of Christ didn't call themselves a new religion. They just followed Christ. They're like, this is the example, we're going to do our best to live up to this example. And this is going to be a process that we'll walk through for our whole lives. And it's clearly bringing us in the right direction and unifying. And then there's a certain point where that way of life was named a new thing. And now that way of life is Christianity. And now that's the official religion of Rome. And it's like, that seems to be a fundamental flaw to me of Christianity, that we consider ourselves to be Christian and other people aren't Christian. And as opposed to, we are all consciously or unconsciously trying to learn what it means to follow Christ. Whether we had formulated that or not, we're all trying to become more ideal. And Christ is the ultimate ideal. So I don't really believe in thinking of myself as a Christian in the sense that other people aren't Christians, but thinking of myself as a Christian in the sense that I'm trying to learn to walk in the way of Christ, but that secular people are too.
Yeah.
Like whatever the goal of Christianity is the goal of the sciences, which is to discover what's really to get to the bottom of reality, and then find that, whatever's at the bottom of reality, and then live that out, which is pure consciousness in Hinduism, or God in Christianity, or whatever absolute truth every science is unconsciously looking for. But I think that's the fundamental problem. It's like, but Christ predicted that, because he was like, you guys think that I came here to sort things out, but I actually came here to pit all of you against each other. I think he was saying that because he understood that for unification to eventually happen, a great diversity, a great separation has to happen first, where everybody, like, he's like, basically he was saying, no, I'm not about to unify you guys. You guys are actually going to fight over what I even mean for thousands of years before you all figure it out and come together. So he knew that he was going to have that impact, but he was right, and we couldn't help but try to put him in a box, and then call ourselves people who live in that box, and call other people who don't live in that box.
Yeah, so maybe the categorization of Christianity, like calling it, okay, we're Christian, then that kind of just made it so that now it's their separation. Because like when we were talking earlier about how now we're at this point where there's a lot of asymmetry, is that the right word, where things aren't symmetrical?
Yes.
But like when it comes down to it, at the lowest levels of the physics, there's just certain particles that we're all made of. But like up here we see differences in shoe versus pant. But down there it's just they're all atoms put together in different ways. And so in the same way, that's probably one of the flaws that like I'm trying to pinpoint is how Christ's point wasn't to separate us and categorize, hey, this is Christ and now this is the kingdom, but like no, we're all made of atoms.
Mm-hmm.
We're all just one thing.
Mm-hmm. That whole idea of like the us versus them, or like the idea that there are Christians that get into heaven and that there are the dummies that just don't see the truth and they don't make it. That whole thing does feel like more institutional to me than it was based on the words of Jesus or based on the Bible. To my knowledge, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't say anywhere in the Bible like the only way to get into heaven is through Jesus, or that, or I guess, and that if you don't say the phrase, I accept Jesus into my life, you don't make it to heaven. Like, that's the password to get into heaven.
It does. It does say that the only way to get to heaven is Jesus. But the point that's missed is that when Jesus spoke, the spirit of being spoke. So it wasn't Jesus saying that, it was God saying that. It wasn't the relative man saying the only way to get to heaven is through me, this relative human being man named Jesus. The point of Jesus is that the field of being, the unified field of pure consciousness, God, all that was given a mouthpiece, and Jesus was that mouthpiece. But when Jesus says the only way to get through heaven is through me, you're not supposed to hear the human saying it. You're supposed to hear the spirit behind that human saying that. And that spirit belongs to everybody. And there's a really interesting point later in the New Testament that says the only unforgivable sin is to blaspheme the Holy Spirit. But blasphemy against the Son is forgivable. So what it was saying is, even if you don't get the point exactly that Jesus was the embodiment of God, to deny God is really the problem. Yeah, to deny that which Jesus spoke on behalf of is really the problem, not to deny the person Jesus.
Yeah. So I suppose it's really easy to misunderstand.
Sin. And what it means by unforgivable sin is just that if you don't get this point, you're fucked. Like, if you don't get that there is a unifying, commanding, transcendent element of being that we all have access to, and that it's the only way, you're going to continue to be lost. Like, you're never going to not feel lost in life until you come into contact with this. But I don't think it meant to explicitly say that the only way to come into contact with that is through the Christian path.
Or is through the man, or the path laid out by Jesus of Nazareth, specifically, the dude. Well, like, there's other ways to God.
Yeah, because I feel like now we're just kind of making shrines to this man that we're creating. So it's not really even what he meant, like who he actually was. Right. It's just this picture of the man that we have in his philosophies.
Yeah.
Right?
A telephone game. It's yeah.
So in the Ten Commandments, there's a commandment not to make statues of God, because God didn't want people to mix up. Moses had this inspiration moment where he realized people are mixing up the absolute with these statues, and then they missed the point. So he banned statues. Yeah. And so what we did in response was build psychological instead of physical statues and worship those. Yep. And we're still missing the point, because it can't really be put in any box what we're really after. So how was Peterson's teachings able to deliver you from that boxed thinking that prevented you from understanding the true transcendence of Christ?
I want to say that I was at this point where I was like, okay, I think God's real, just because I felt his guidance. And I don't know if it was his guidance or if it was something else. But the more I think about it, I could call it his guidance. And it could be something we could describe through physics someday. Right? But right now we just aren't able to like detect those waves or whatever.
Sure.
Yeah.
So that's possible. But anyways, I felt like, okay, this God that I'm believing in isn't the actual God that I need to be in touch with. And so I think when it has to do something with Jordan talking about Nietzsche and how Nietzsche said God is dead, right, and we killed him. Something about that. And so it probably has to do with how we're talking about just categorizing who that's kind of, now I'm getting into a point that I hadn't thought of yet, but just how come there's a compilation of 66 books, and now we're all subscribing to the idea, or at least if you're a Christian, right? Christian, you're subscribing to the idea that these 66 books are the Word of God. That's something that I hear repeatedly. is they say God's, like, you're supposed to take it as this is God's word.
And the only God's word.
And the only God's word, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is strange because God didn't compile these books.
Right.
But they can claim that God compiled these books through divine inspiration.
Yeah.
But that's a little strange, you know, if God's infinite, but he's going to say everything that you need, like everything that is me is in these books. And that's kind of weird.
Yeah, it can't be.
The point, you're supposed to transcend the book and get to the source of the book. Like in the same sense that the Hindus like give you a mantra, and they're like, it's not about the mantra, transcend the mantra and find what's at the bottom of it. You're supposed to transcend the book. You're supposed to get to the bottom of the source of the book. Because the people who wrote the book didn't have the book.
Yeah,
And they obviously got the point because they wrote the book.
Mm-hmm.
So all these different people, like Paul was able to speak. Paul didn't even personally meet Jesus.
Yeah.
He met Jesus in spirit. Like he had an encounter with Christ in spirit.
He had a vision.
He had a vision after Christ was dead.
Yeah.
And then he got together with these Christians. He's like, oh, we're talking about the same shit. I had that like moment of inspiration. Yeah. And so to say like, I mean, Christians who say the only way to understand God is through this book, they don't understand that the people who wrote that book had direct contact with God, and that the point is to learn from people who had direct contact with God in order to transcend those relative teachers to having direct contact with God
so
yourself.
you can have direct contact with God.
Yeah.
And, which is something. So I was at the church that my parents go to, and I'd been there before. I was going like every Sunday for a month or two. My goal was to try to meet a nice single lady, but there wasn't a good pool there. There was like 5 chicks at most, right? And so I went through them. A couple of them I was just like, okay,
banged them all.
Not my type. Oh yeah, I cranked them out. Bro. No, okay, so like, you know, two or three of them I was like, I don't even want to talk to you, like, you know, it's just not my type. And then the other 2 made advances. Advances, I don't know if that's the right word. It is. And they were stopped, right? One of them told me that that she knew that it wasn't God's time yet, and that God's time is ultimate, and so.
So her direct contact with God informed her that you were a douchebag who was at that church to meet a chick.
Basically, maybe, yeah, no, that's a possible outcome, yeah. Anyway, so then, okay, so she was the last one, she told me that, and I was like, oh yeah, trust God, you know, like, cool, you know, and so then just left, you know, with like, hey, you're doing the right thing by trusting God.
For sure.
Because I was like, I mean, sure, God, okay. So then I left, and then like 4 months later, I'm back. Because I'm still trying to figure out, I'm like, I don't want to just abandon this church idea. Because I don't like church for some reason, but I don't know what it is exactly. And I'm like, there's got to be some value in this. If so many people are going to, if my family raised me in this, and I feel like I'm doing pretty good, like I feel happy with myself, and I feel like I'm starting to become more in contact with consciousness, right? At least I'm making advances there, some sort of progress, right? And so I'm like, okay, if I was in an environment, if I was raised in an environment that would be destructive to me as a human, right, then I probably wouldn't be where I am. So that means that something in the church is doing something right.
They're obviously onto something.
They're onto something.
Because you were raised so well.
Yeah, so I'm like, what is it? What's going on? So I'm back. I'm not going like every Sunday, but I'm going and investigating. But I was talking to one of the guys and I said, you know, last time I wasn't here for different reasons. I was trying to find a girl. I told him that. And then he's like, yeah, well, you got to get down. The point of coming to church is to grow in your relationship with Jesus. Right? And so when he said that, I was like, that sounds a little weird. So I started thinking about it, and then I was like, why does it sound weird? Well, for one, Jesus isn't here anymore. So we're not making contact with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so why are we all referring to it as growing your relationship with Jesus? If he's not here, like in the Bible it talks about that he leaves. And he literally tells him, I'm leaving, preparing a better way for you guys.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I'm leaving you with my spirit. Which, if you believe that God and Jesus and the Holy Spirit are one unit, it essentially just means it's basically probably the same. It's like the Holy Spirit is like something to look at that is being. Right? Like you were talking about.
Yeah.
And so
he's saying like what I really represent is omnipresent and eternal.
So I'm just
if
gonna
you're
leave
stuck
it here
to
for
me
you.
as a symbol of that, you're missing the point. I'm informing you that you have contact with this.
Basically. And so now I'm trying to So I was like, okay, Jesus is gone. Why are we still thinking about like, hey, get into a relationship with Jesus? Which circles back to the idea of not creating these wooden statues of God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what about 12 Rules for Life?
12 Rules for Life. Okay. Well, it was partly, so 12 Rules for Life guided me on how to live. Because I was just this impulsive, dude. And I would just try and be happy all the time. Okay, let's go in here.
But I'm curious. I don't want to just force you into the book, but I am curious, like how.
I think there's something in the book that we can tie into it.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious what it is about Jordan Peterson's approach to discussing the rules of life, the natural order of life, and Christian ideas that is so fundamentally different than what you experienced.
Oh, yeah, that was kind of the original question as well. How did Jordan help me develop a new sense of who God was?
Mm-hmm.
It was just when I was listening to the biblical series, because that's the one that I heard first before Maps of Meaning.
Mm-hmm.
I found it intriguing how he connected the mythological world with psychological phenomenon that benefits people.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically, like seeing how if you live by these rules, it actually helps you in your brain. Or talking about how the Bible is like hyperlinked and that you can see meanings, archetypes that are played out in the Old Testament and the New Testament. So it's the same thing, but just in two areas. Or even within the words themselves, like they're using this word here, and they're using the same word. Kind of like I like how you were talking about how Paul met Jesus after he was gone. But yeah, they were all talking about the same thing. So the same thing happens in the Bible. Is they're all talking. There's like certain concepts that are talked about in the same way, but they're spaced out, right? So just seeing Jordan. So I started listening to those things, and so Jordan basically shifted my mind from these are literal stories, but I don't really believe them, so they're kind of fairy tales. To these things, they're fairy tales, they're myths, but there's value in them. That when acted in the real world, they play out like if they were real.
Right.
Sure.
And so he started making me see that aspect of Christianity and of the biblical stories. And so, but then as time went on, I started realizing, wait, these aren't separate things. It's not like you can live in this fairy world where you're a Christian, you believe that they're real, and then you can live in this physics world where you believe about physics and you're trying to figure this out. They're one universe. Mm-hmm. And so like the mythological stories, they're actually like happening, but just not in the same way that you. I feel like it plays out like a movie where you read it and you think it's like a movie, but it's not like a movie, and that's where I'm still having trouble. I'm trying to figure that out. But basically, Jordan helped me start to gap that bridge between, instead of making it there's this and there's that, it's just one.
Yeah. Okay, so I think something fundamentally different about Peterson's approach that I'm hearing in what you're saying is that he's able to put religion in its proper context, whereas a lot of religious teachers who are like full-time religious teachers, they put it so wildly out of its context that they have like scientific and historical opinions based on things from the Bible that were written before there was even a concept of recorded history in science. And like, they have it so far out of its context. And he's like, no, here's where its context is. And when you see religious ideas in their proper context, they just explode with value and meaning.
Yep.
Whereas before, you have this skepticism about like, there's something wrong with this, there's something wrong with this, there's something wrong with this. Because you can sense that it's out of its context, but you can't articulate that, and it makes you abandon the whole thing. Mm-hmm. And when he puts it in its context, you can actually accept the whole thing. You're like, oh, okay, when you treat religion like religion, and you treat science like science, the meaning of these religious stories just like three-dimensionally unfolds off the pages.
I also think this situation makes me think of Andy Stanley's Deep and Wide and the difference between like deep and wide religious experiences. Because we talked about in that episode how Buddhism is sort of a more individual religion that is about inward reflection and like understanding through going deeper into yourself. Whereas so often Christian, at least like Western modern Christian churches are so much about community and about like getting together and about like discussing religion together, to the extent that like, and I know that there are small groups and that sort of thing that they encourage, but not people don't participate in those as much as they do just going to the big church service. So what I think Jordan Peterson does that maybe the church services that you've been to didn't do was really give you like your own mission to go on that is just you and is about getting to God through looking deeply in yourself and fixing yourself and aligning yourself the way you want to be aligned. Whereas church is
trying to align you with their vision.
Yeah, it's about community, which has its place, but it isn't really complete if they don't encourage your own personal growth enough. It's
kind of like when we were talking about earlier with the whole government thing, how government is made for us to not kill each other, basically, and so we can live and try to prosper, make progress, versus if a good amount of us were transcendent, what was it, TM? Transcendent meditation proponents or whatever, we'd all be on the same page because we'd be connected to that consciousness that interlinks between all of us.
Right.
And so I think in the same way, there's like what I felt like pastors weren't giving me on their Sunday sermon was like that the answer's within. That's what I hear. I hear a lot, hey, whatever you're looking for, you got to find it within yourself.
Right.
But I think that to find those answers within yourself, by yourself, takes decades to find those answers, right? So you need someone, maybe a guru, to help guide you to find those answers.
Yeah.
And so I think Jordan Peterson was a form of a guru to me to try to find my way. I'm trying to find my way to that enlightenment, to get into the consciousness. And so I think that the pastors, the churches, they're trying to feed me a weight loss pill. And what Jordan was trying to do is trying to get you to change the way you see reality. And try to, but I feel like he's trying to be like, okay, there's right ways of thinking, but there's multiple right ways of thinking. And then I'm not saying that I'm 100% right in what I'm telling you, but I'm just trying to help. I'm trying to work together with you like a dialogue. A lot of his lectures are dialogues to try to extend our range of how we see reality.
Yeah.
And so I think that's what intrigued me versus the sermons with the sermons, I felt like there's a lot of archetypes, and I would just pick up on the archetype within the first 5 minutes or so, and then just be like, okay, I already know how the rest of the sermon goes. And so versus with Jordan, it's like, okay, I have issues in my life. This, I don't know how to get from the archetype to this level here. Where what can I do to fix this?
Yeah.
And so that was an issue I had a lot of times. I would, with my youth pastor, who was my mentor at New Vintage, right? I would come to him a lot and ask him, like, because there's questions that I had about how to live my life. I was like, okay, am I allowed to do this? Am I allowed to do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? Is this a sin? Is this not a sin? Specific stuff. And I felt like he never really had a good answer for me. I felt like he was kind of just spouting off the archetypes, which are good answers, but except they're not good answers because they don't tell me what to do in now and with my body. They don't tell me how to move.
Yeah.
And so I feel like Jordan was kind of teaching me how to pair the archetype to my actions in present time.
Yeah. Okay, so a couple comments I want to add is, you mentioned that if we all had transcended, if we were all in contact with pure consciousness or God, then we wouldn't need governance. You see that in the early church, where early followers of Jesus would transcend government, they would manage themselves, they would all share. And that often today by critics of America, men, Christianity, and tradition in general will say Jesus was a socialist. He didn't establish for them a separate body that would manage their resources and distribute them for them.
They managed it among themselves.
They managed them amongst one another. So there wasn't socialism or capitalism. And that's like one of the biggest questions in political science, or at least should be. It's like, how do we get to the point where we're mature enough that we don't need a government? Are we going to have a government forever? Are we ever going to grow the fuck up?
Yeah.
And we'll grow up, I think, when each individual is in contact with God and oriented properly.
That's great.
And one of the things that Christian churches are missing are psychotechnologies that the individual can use to come into contact with God
Yeah.
and be oriented by those inner experiences with God. And so we have to go borrow psychotechnologies from Hinduism. And now I, as a religious person, am trying to adapt Hindu psychotechnologies in a way that honors my Christian faith, but also without just appropriating and robbing another culture.
Mm-hmm.
But we have to go to the neighbor and ask to borrow a cup of sugar. We have to go to the Hindus and say, like, you guys, I heard you have a way that we can contact God ourselves. And they're like, oh, sure, here you go. We have to go borrow that because there's not much instruction in the Christian tradition of how the individual can contact God. And Christian pastors tend to speak as though they're speaking to groups and think about theological direction as though they are directions for groups. And one of the things that Peterson does differently is he speaks like he's talking to an individual.
Yeah.
And there's 300 people in the crowd, and each one of them is an individual. And he's talking to each individual. He's not talking to the group,
the audience
at large, because you can't talk to a group. There's no such thing as talking to a group. You're talking to 300 separate persons. You can talk to persons, but you can't talk to people.
Yeah.
And so what he does to orient people to God is interpret theological instruction as though it is instruction for the individual on how to conduct himself in alignment with the natural law of God. Whereas a lot of pastors think about, well, how should this group of people all conduct themselves?
How should they act?
Well, the group doesn't act.
Mm-hmm.
So where does the action orient? Where does the action originate? And how do we instruct that and align that with God? And when that happens, yeah, we all are aligned with God, and we all are self-governing. But then church is still necessary because actually, I mean, is it necessary? There's a great like mystical enlightened Catholic teacher named Richard Rohr who says that he wishes all the churches would shut down for a year and teach everybody how to pray instead. Everybody stopped going to church for a year and learned how to pray instead. Everyone's growth would increase. And we actually saw that happen involuntarily with COVID. And when you left the church was at the beginning of COVID.
Yep.
And you did learn how to pray through that. And so I think like there's a good Christian awakening happening through the forced shutdowns where we all had to go in.
Yeah.
And the distance between our physical bodies, and the distance in the outer world, say it this way, the distance of outer space between us and God is much greater than the distance of inner space between us and God.
Mm-hmm.
It's way quicker to dive in. And then we come to church together so that people who are not yet oriented to God can come and see what it looks like for a community to be oriented with God. And so when people came into contact with those early church communities, they're like, there's something happening here. This is a different way to do life. This is different. And that was an experience in and of itself.
Yeah.
But I think, like, to say that church is where we learn how to have a relationship with Jesus is a misunderstanding because they're trying to bring a group of people into alignment with Jesus. And that is such a long, roundabout way compared to teaching individuals to come into a deeper relationship with Jesus. And then church being a forum where the oriented come to be together. And where, just because consciousness is a field that we all share, when people who are oriented properly come together, whether they meditate together or whether they worship together and each individual understands Jesus, there is a great effect that arises out of that.
I think so.
So church is super valuable, but not if they misunderstand that the beginning of the thing is for each person to come into a direct experience of God.
I think that's, you hit the hammer on the nail there with what I was trying to say. Yeah, it's like how...
I guess that works. You hit the hammer onto the nail.
It does count. It's wrong, but it counts.
That was a nice reading.
What? That's all right.
You hit the nail on the head.
You hit the hammer on the nail?
I mean, you do.
That does work. But no, that works.
But that's not the word, though.
No one's ever said it before.
There's more than one way to skin a cat, dude.
Nail on the head?
Yeah, because the head of the nail.
Otherwise, you hit it like kind of on the side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the hammer hits the nail.
You hit the bullseye there.
Oh, sweet.
There we go. Of something that I've been thinking about, right? Because it's true. It's like that's what's kind of been going on that I've been sensing when I go to the church. Is I'm like they're trying to instruct a group on how to act, but that's not effective in our lifespan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the idea of if each one of us could get in touch with consciousness, or you can, in the Christian sense, get in touch with Yahweh or God individually, 100%. Like, we could meet up together and we'd all be on the same page. Like, we'd all know, hey, we're different. Me and you have our differences, like, they're vast differences. But we can be with each other and have a good time and just feel at peace while we congregate and make some progress in aiding the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, that's kind of another thing that I was one of my criticisms of the church.
Because church shouldn't even be for the Christians who are gathered to.
It's for the
to
sake,
celebrate.
It's for everyone else.
Yeah, hey, we as a body, we've arrived, we've beat the game, we've come into contact with God, we're satisfied and fulfilled. Now let's get together and then multiply that. And the church, the pastor should be for the congregation, but then the congregation, including the pastor, all as a group, should be for the rest of the community.
Yeah.
We're here for all the people who don't experience this peace yet.
Yeah. Every single person should. So, okay. Yeah, one of my criticisms was, what are we doing? What's the church doing? Like, because they say that they're doing something, but then the way that they act, they're not being too efficient in accomplishing that goal, right? And so then I'm okay, so what are we doing? So, okay, we're meeting up every Sunday. We're talking similar language of Christianese, right? And it's kind of a ritual. You know, you get there, you know that, okay, we've agreed that we're going to worship for 30 minutes. We're going to listen to our pastor or a guest speaker, someone, speak for an hour. And then we're going to pray it out. And we know that, you know, so you have this and you have that, and it's at this time every Sunday. And so I'm like, okay, well, what's the point of that? So if we're just going to schedule it out, why not schedule it out more effectively?
Like what?
That's what I'm trying to think about now. It's like, well, what kind of church would I have? Is what I've asked myself when I thought about that. I'm like, okay, so, and that's where I'm at right now. When I came here, I was like, okay,
yeah,
what would I have if I had to meet up every week? And so then it's like, okay, well, are we going to meet every week in my church? And so it's like, what does that look like? So I think we should ask ourselves, if we want to reach the individual and help them get in contact with God, to use Christian terms,
mm-hmm.
how would we go about that?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you reach the most people and help them individually find their path and help them get onto the way? Mm-hmm. Which is crazy that you said the way. I'm the way, the truth, and the life.
Mm-hmm. Which
is crazy too, because we all refer to our experiences as our life, you know, and we talk about truth and what is truth, what is factual versus truth, right? Mm-hmm. The way, trying to help you get on your own path, your own way. So it's like, how do we help the individual?
I don't know. I'll be in school for the next 5 years trying to answer that question, so I can be a chaplain and help people get oriented properly. I don't know.
Yeah,
if you handed me a church right now, I wouldn't know what the fuck to do with it.
That's what I didn't think.
Besides follow the format. Like, we got a format. If I do that, I'm at least not doing it wrong.
At least you're, keeping some people out of trouble.
Yeah.
For some amount of time.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of because I was like, okay, I'm criticizing the church and whatever, and I'm like, okay, something's funky, but I feel like there has to be. Now I have to aim myself. Okay, what's the solution?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe at some level it's just like meant to be imperfect because maybe people are like, in order to get to a real religious realization, they're meant to get annoyed by a fake religious realization.
That is part of the process, yeah.
Like you're meant to go to church and then go, wait, this is dumb. I'm smarter than this. And then you leave and then you go somewhere else and you like eventually look in and see kind of what they meant but weren't saying correctly. And then you're supposed to go back to it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just like there can't be a church that functions correctly because it's meant to work for some people and it's meant to work for other people by turning them off and getting them to leave and to go do something else for a while.
What I hear you alluding to is the perpetual process of reformation and evolution in the church.
Mm-hmm.
Which is like, I follow this one dude, Caleb Brown, on Facebook. And his thing is, the church is bad. How bad is the church? He's like posting petitions because the pastor said something. And he needs to be kicked out of his. He's the principal of the school. We got to kick him out. And he's like posting videos.
Pastors.
He's canceling pastors. He's canceling his school. He's like accusing churches of abusing him, but not saying what the word abuse means. On and on and on. He's obviously very hurt by several people, but it's so silly because it's like, by definition, a church is imperfect people trying to come into better alignment with the perfect. So if your game is point out flaws of the church, good news for you.
They're all there.
You're never going to run out because if it was a perfect, if you see a perfect church, then like
they're
it's
failing at reaching out.
Even if there was a perfect that for sure, because like if you looked at the groups of people following around Jesus, it was an ugly mess.
Oh yeah.
And it should be. But like by definition, once upon a time everything was perfect. Now it's not. Hopefully in the future it will be. We're working towards that. That's like the foundational narrative of Hinduism and the Judeo-Christian tradition and everything. Trying to get there. Well, we're not there, obviously, because we're trying to get there. So therefore, whatever method we use to get there is not perfect. And so you and I, or you will be leaders of a church or a faith group or a small group or something, and we think that we're trying to get people somewhere, and then someone has an insight that's much deeper than our insight, and they have to reform off of us and evolve in another direction too.
Yeah.
And we're gonna keep like fucking Israel needs to wrestle with God, because all we can do is wrestle with God until we come into union with Him. So you look at a church, you're like, oh, it's ugly. They got bruises and scrapes. Yeah, it's because they're wrestling with perfection. Because they're trying to conceptualize, realize, and promote perfection. So no shit, they're pretty far off.
Yeah, they're grinding.
So we never want to fall into the like being the anti-church Christians. We never want to be like I'm a real Christian because the church sucks. It's like that's such a stupid game. I mean, that is a child's game. We can't do that. So we have to like be good members of a church who are also trying to reform. You have to form before you reform. So if we're not like, I haven't been a good member of a church really. And so that's part of the reason that I'm in no place to be a spiritual leader. It's like we have to be great members of a church who are also looking for that next step, so that we're going the next rung. Like we have to get to the rung that we're at now to get to the next rung. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think I might be seeking for this great leap into the answer. And I'll probably, if I keep going this way, then I'll die making not much progress, but just having a lot of thoughts that might have gone somewhere. And so maybe the idea is to integrate with the church and then see where we can tweak stuff to improve on trying to get to that oneness with God. Something that Raleigh was saying about how maybe the church is designed to just turn, like you go in and then next thing you know you're like, okay, I got to get out. And then next thing you know you're bouncing around so many times to so many people, so many ideas that you realize, okay, you either go into just like, okay, everything sucks and nothing means anything and I'm just not going to take responsibility over anything and just be like, okay, the world is against us. Or you turn to Christ to say the Christian way. So my dad is a person who I like. I think he's doing a good job. I don't know how he feels about his own life or how
just
he feels
of being
about
a person.
Yeah, I think I'm like I like you as a person. You know, if you analyze like what he's done and whatever, it's not like, oh yeah, he's produced really good stuff. He's done all this charitable stuff or whatever. But I just like it. I don't know why. Something he always says is that he doesn't follow the pastor. He doesn't follow any pastors. He follows Christ. And the quote that he always brings up, that he says God spoke to him, that I forgot what he was saying. I think he was going through some sort of betrayal with the church, but that God said, reminded him of a passage in the Bible that says the disciples, Jesus tells them something about like, why don't you guys just leave me? Why are you guys following around? And then they said, only you have words of life. Where would we go? And so I think that kind of ties it back in also to how it's like we all have to go back to that consciousness, the oneness with the universe, and look within, into that God within us, and that God that's in everything. Instead of trying to, go to somewhere else, something like that.
Yeah. Jesus also said, call no man father.
Yeah, that's a weird one.
And then the Catholics were like, I'm Father Smith. It's like,
yeah, they said, come confess to me.
You rascals.
Come tell me what you did. Come here, I'm your daddy. Come here.
Pope in a very
I'm your daddy. I'm your daddy.
Yeah, literally, they are. And then eventually they're like, if you don't have access to a real Catholic, then you can just confess to the Holy Spirit. It's like, well, thank you, God.
That makes it so much easier. Yeah, thank you so much.
But
if there's a real one around, get in there.
right. If there's a real one,
if we're
not just the Holy Spirit knockoff.
If we're not in COVID times.
Holy Spirit, or as I call it, Diet Pastor.
Diet Pastor?
Yeah, the structure of the anointed human on the stage and then all of the subservient humans seated definitely needs to change.
Mm-hmm.
It needs to be more communal than that. But there's a lot of churches like that. There's underground churches. We went to a wedding for.
Oh, a lot of more communal churches.
Yes. So we went to a wedding for our friend Hans Brist, and his family and his wife's family were from a small Christian group called. They just call themselves The Truth?
Yeah, the one name you can find them by is 2x2s. Like, that's the Wikipedia article.
Nice.
They don't call themselves
That's
2x2s.
And they follow the model where the teachers travel house to house. They don't carry resources with them. Each house takes care of them, houses them, feeds them. They teach, they move on. They follow that model. We attended a church service the day after the funeral, or the wedding. His funeral. And then they sat around.
Quick joke.
Go ahead.
About the whole funeral thing? Okay.
Sure.
Why is divorce so expensive? Because it's worth it. That's an electrical inspector joke. No, I don't know if he's an inspector. He's an instructor. Yeah.
Well, I hope he's okay.
He's great. He's great. He's probably got a divorce.
I hope he's okay. They did a quiet reflection, a reading, and then people just popcorned insights that they had as they all quietly reflected and prayed. Okay. And there's another Christian church that is like that. The Quakers have a similar model. They sit quietly for an hour.
Can we find these guys on Google? Like, are they in the area?
Quakers? Yeah, I just talked to them a couple weeks ago. There's a Quaker group here. They just meet at houses.
Quakers, like, what is it?
Like a Quaker Oats, like that.
Yeah, like the Quakers,
yeah. I don't think the people around here are like culturally Quaker, where they wear the certain outfits and everything.
I've seen those guys though.
But the way that they worship is they reflect quietly together. That's what they do, and then they like popcorn insights that they have from reflection. Really? And I do think like if the one like daydream that I have about my ideal church, my imagination would incorporate a brand of Christian meditation. There would be a Christian meditation, there would be Christian music worship, there would be Christian speaking. The speaking would be fairly short because you can say something powerful in 10 minutes. You know, you don't need
or less
fucking in a history lesson like you're a history professor. Like you Googled World War II on Tuesday. You have to do this every week. Like it is a little ridiculous to listen to a human being talk for an hour every week. It's a little ridiculous to think that anyone would want to listen to you talk for an hour every week. And so I think it should be like a meditation, a music worship, and a short talk, so that we're going to like go in and find God, now come out and find God, now celebrate God in music and union. To incorporate all elements into a service, I think would be really cool.
Just kind of teach people a routine that they can build into their everyday life, where they go, okay, this is what we do at church.
And an expectation that in addition to reading Scripture, and reading Scripture can be short, like you can read a passage and meditate on that for the evening. You don't need to read 3 pages a day or whatever. But if there was a practice that was normalized in the church community that was like, here's the way we do Christian meditation, and here's the way that we do readings that are short, and we do readings together, so we're all kind of reading the same thing, and we do the same kinds of meditations, and so there's homework that people can use to contact God within themselves that is not overbearing. It needs to be lighthearted. It's like, here's a 20-minute thing you can do in the evening. 10-minute meditation, 5-minute reading, 5-minute journaling, you know, like simple things they can do on their own, and then in the congregation they do a version together that's ideally led by different people, so that there's not the shepherd and sheep model. Because Jesus' point, partially, was the only good shepherd is omnipresent.
It's the one within all of us.
Yeah, is that the kingdom of God is within you, that the thing that's within you is the only good shepherd. I happen to be that in human form. It's never going to happen again. Sorry, you guys are all fakes. And we haven't seen anything better yet. So it seems like he had a point.
Yeah.
And now what we're supposed to do is all as equals worship that shepherd that is now this abstract.
And that shepherd isn't a statue. It's not something that's formed that we all agree, hey, this is what the shepherd is.
No, it's that which you make statues out of.
And you get in touch with it within yourself. Oh man, there's something I had to say about what you were just saying. Oh, and what if the weekly knowledge that you get in, the routine training or something like that, of how to get in touch with that shepherd, what if it was progressive also, like it stacks, so that every week plays off of last week? So it's not just like, here's a new topic today. Okay, here's a new one. Doesn't have anything to do with the last one. Here's just a new one. But that they're all interlinked and they're all with the same goal in mind. So you're basically learning about the same thing every week, but just trying to view it through different ways and try to learn more about it. Because it's like, well, right now I'm still trying to understand Peterson's concepts, and it's been like 2 years, and I'm still like, I'm not listening to his stuff all the time. But I'm still acting it out, and I'm trying to get, like, he didn't get to the bottom of what he's thinking about. He's still thinking about his stuff today. Yeah. And I feel like I'm still on that path where I'm, like, trying to follow it in that footsteps. Where, like, I'm trying to piggyback off of what you're saying. See if I missed anything. See if I can, get better, like, make a sharper point out of some of the things you're saying. But also just overall the goal is to get in touch with the shepherd.
Yeah. We've all been through the Gary Vee phase, which is only like 3 to 6 months. And you're like, okay, I get it.
Dude,
I get your thing.
Not for me. It was like 4 months.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like I get your thing.
Yeah.
I can move on now.
Right, crush it.
Yeah.
That's gratitude.
You gotta if you're not fucking
gratitude.
It's like, you gotta buy things and sell them for more than they're worth on the internet.
You gotta grind, you gotta be happy.
Right. It's like, okay, I get your thing. But it does take years to get over Peterson. Like, to go, okay, now I get your thing. Like, he doesn't have some, like,
it's not like a
two-dimensional ideology where you're like, I get it. Next. Like, you can read and watch his stuff for years and still keep on going.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Dude, the Gary Vee, man. That was good.
He was a very, very encouraging mentor.
Dude, he freaking
very
changed
genuine
my life.
And kind person.
He changed my life for sure.
Yeah.
Because he's the guy that kind of got me onto the Jordan stuff. So basically, I was looking for an answer, trying to see where I should go. And then Gary was just like, all right, fucking hustle. Work with your dad. You're not gonna regret that. This is life. Man up.
Mm-hmm.
And then just be grateful and just enjoy it. Basically, just enjoy the process. That's basically what he told me. And then
for context, you literally talked to him.
I literally talked to him.
On like a stream.
He literally heard my story.
And you guys were talking back and forth, and he really told you, like...
And he loved you.
It was really nice.
Yeah,
it was really nice.
A very heartwarming video. He loved you. And he was very, very sincerely encouraging.
Dude, I felt pretty sincere about what I was saying. Like, I felt like I was just I was being vulnerable.
Yeah.
I felt like, I was like, okay, I don't care how I look. I'm just going to try to say what's on my heart, the best of my ability.
Yeah.
And
he met you there.
Yeah, he met me there, and so that was cool. But basically, he was kind of like the aim that I had. I was like, this guy, whatever he's doing it right. I've been listening to his stuff, and it's been making me feel good.
Right. So
I'm going to tell him what's going on with me, and whatever he tells me, I trust it, I'm going to go with it. Right. And so that's basically what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but then after that, I started implementing that, and then I was like, okay, so now I'm on this path, hard work, gratitude, okay? I feel like there's more to this, and he just wasn't giving me any more of that, because he just kept repeating the same stuff about.
Some of his magic is his simplicity.
Yeah, and it's
like the authenticity of Bernie Sanders, like someone who says the same thing for their whole career, and you're like, they really mean that because that's all they say, and the simplicity makes them so effective.
And so because that's the thing though, it's like the stage where he met me at, I was anxious, and kind of like what you were talking about, how Peterson, that idea of like, hey, get off your ass, like carry the cross, carry the burden, bear as much responsibility as you can, can be crippling for someone who's just anxious all the time, like neurotic, and can't, like, thinks of that and then just goes, that's too much pain, and just does it, shuts down. And so with Gary, it was like a jump start for me where I was like, okay, there's hope here, I can do this, get down the path, and then next, and like, the key was not beating myself up, just to not judge myself, because he calls it, don't judge yourself because everyone else is doing it for you, which Peterson would say that we, as humans, what is it? It's where you hand off the sanity to somebody else.
We outsource sanity.
We outsource our sanity. which is basically what Gary's saying. Is
So you're sane in orientation to consensus reality. The individual is sane in orientation to consensus reality. So you're not a sane individual. You're sane because of how you...
Because you agree to follow what the other people are doing?
You're sane because other people say you are.
It's a principle from Beyond Order. He goes into how like people think that psychologists too much emphasize the individual becoming sane without realizing that sanity is
everything around you
by the group. Consensus reality is held by the group, and so it's not as shallow as you're sane because people consider you sane. It's that 100 people can better figure out what sanity is and enforce that for one another than an individual could on their own. An individual on an island goes bonkers because there's not a group to hold them to a certain sanity, and the sanity of the group is saner than the sanity of the individual generally.
Which is the other thing that was failing me at the Christian churches that I was going at, is I felt like the focus was on the individual and simultaneously on a group. It was like we're all one group, but the judgment we're casting is on you, and your salvation is yours, and you should be happy and like take the dopamine hit from that you're I'm going to heaven, right? But we're also all going to heaven, but like take pride in that. Like you can die today and you're going to heaven. And so then when I had issues, they were between me and God, and me and the demons. Versus Peterson kind of pointed me towards the idea of, hey, if something's wrong in your life, maybe you should look at who you're interacting with, what you're interacting with, and what you're doing, and who you're surrounding yourself with. And like, do you have, like, there's certain necessities that humans need to live in harmony, in balance. So like, do you have those things? I think he talks about like for most people, you need to have a romantic interest. You need to have a certain amount of friends that you can talk to and you can trust and rely on, and that that they can share your victories and your losses without, like they won't get mad at you for when you win because they're like, I wanted that or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that you need, a certain type of diet that for some people, just waking up and having a high protein, low carb diet within the first 30 minutes of waking up changes their whole day.
Mm-hmm. What time is it?
It's going to be 7 in 2 minutes.
Oh, we haven't even touched 12 rules for life.
Yeah, seriously. Okay, I'm going to...
You don't have time to read them off.
Oh, God. Okay.
No, yeah, you are going to have to pivot to telling us your favorite insights from the book.
Okay. Can I wrap this thought up?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Basically, that the outside world influences the inside as much, if not more, than me influencing myself. And so what I started doing is I would wake up and have like 3 eggs and 2 pieces of bacon, and that actually helped me out because I would be way more level-headed throughout the day for some reason.
Yeah.
And so I just trusted the Peterson. I was just like, Peterson said it, so we're good.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but anyways, so yeah, okay, 12 rules for life. Should we just touch on all of them?
Whatever ones are most important to you.
Okay, here we go. Okay, this one affected me. It's rule number 1. It's stand up straight with your shoulders back. Summary of this chapter is basically that the way that you should act like you want to be, right? And that you're watching yourself. And so if you want to be, he claims that nobility is a good aim. And so if you want to be a noble person, you should think about how a noble person should act and then act that way. And so you posture yourself standing up straight, shoulders back, because that you look more, you look like you could defend yourself. You look like, hey, this isn't a pushover. This guy's strong and he's healthy.
Sure.
So then you see yourself and you think, I'm strong, I'm healthy, I can make it through whatever challenge I need to take on.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of like a serotonin hit where you view yourself and you go, okay, I'm not on the lowest part of the hierarchy here. I'm not a weakling. So I'm going to make decisions that a strong person would make, and someone who's dominant, I guess, or just lives a good life would make.
Yeah.
And so then that keeps you from falling back into the pattern. Okay?
I definitely think about posture way more since reading this book.
Like
when I see someone either hunched over or like standing up straight, it like reminds me to stand up straight.
Yep. Whenever I feel weird, I think about that. I think about, okay, how am I gotta, like, or if I'm nervous or something, this helps getting big, making yourself big.
Interesting.
It actually works. So I actually learned about that stuff before I got into Gary Vee or Peterson with Tony Robbins, because I ran into like stage fright, and I was like, okay, how do I not be stage fright, right? I want to conquer this. I just want to destroy it, because that's how I felt like. I was like, I can do it. And so Tony Robbins talks about like doing breathing to alter your chemistry, and doing positions, staying like this, right? You notice that bosses are more assertive and they stand like this kind of, right? Or, taking up more space in a room, because people who are more comfortable, they'll be more open, stand up with your legs, they'll get into your space and whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then you tend to take that as, hey, this guy, has some sort of, power over me or something, I don't know. But basically, others will interpret you differently, and you interpret yourself differently based on your posture. So that's the first rule that helped me. You just kind of, and it ties into the don't beat yourself up thing. Because if you're constantly beating yourself up, you're not moving anywhere. Because then you just perceive yourself as someone that can't do anything. So then you just don't do anything.
And if you beat yourself up, then you start going like this more.
Yep.
You start closing
So
more.
it's a full circle. Okay, let's see, what's another one? I'm going to just do 3.
I could have swore number 1 was clean your room. What number is clean your room, out of curiosity?
Clean your room is... I want to say it's 6. I don't see it.
No worries. Doesn't really matter.
I don't see it directly, but I think it's 6, because it says set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world.
That's the one.
That's a good one. Yeah.
I guess clean your room is informally one of the rules.
Oh, okay.
I think it's just that.
Okay.
Something that helped me out a lot was rule number 9. Assume that the person you are listening to might know something you don't. That helped me out a lot, because my mom, in my family, I always saw my mom as, there's nothing she can offer me. She's kind of crazy. Like, there's no value that she could give me other than, helping me out with house chores, loving me, her love, her affection, and stuff like that. I'm like, and her mom, I love her as mom, so that's what she can give me. But the intellectual side, there's nothing I can give her. After reading that, then every person I met, I made an effort to try and like catch myself when I would just turn it off and stop listening, because I thought, okay, I know what they're saying. I'm not going to pay attention. And then I started training myself to, okay, I need to listen to everything. I need to listen to what everyone's saying up to a certain point. Because if someone stops, if someone starts like just wanting to attack you, then you don't need to listen to them, because they don't want to benefit you, or you can't get anything from that, because it's kind of just malicious.
Yeah.
But for the most part, you can just listen to someone, I think, speak what they have to say, and you can get something good out of it, out of everything that everyone says.
Right.
If you set your mind to it, right?
Sure.
And so my mom, why did I bring my mom? Because I thought read that rule, and then I thought, okay, I'm gonna listen to my mom and see what I can get. She has something that I don't know that I need to know, and I started getting stuff from her, and like it was crazy and I was like, what? I can get stuff from her. Started getting stuff from like basically everybody. And so now I'm at the point where, there's still a lot of people that they have stuff that I need to know, but it's not everybody. It used to be everybody. So then everybody I walked into, I'm like, okay, you're telling me stuff that I didn't know, that I need to know. And now it's like, okay, I'm hearing the same stuff that I heard already. And I'm still listening for cues to try to pick up something, but now my focus is elsewhere. It's not everywhere. It's honing in now. So instead of listening to everyone for good advice, it's like, okay, I'm trying to hone into great, into better, more rich sources. But I'm not dismissing anyone, so my ear's still open, but it's just not as, like, focused.
Yeah. And you can listen and still filter.
Yep.
Definitely.
Basically, that's getting better with time. They're all pretty good, but I guess, this one is one that he emphasized more in his new book and also a podcast after his medical stuff that happened to him when he went bad. Is pet a cat when you encounter one on the street. He says, I think I've heard him say that he was maybe going too hard on taking up responsibility and the burden stuff and like trying to bear as much as you can. That's so important, but he also I think he says that he wasn't enjoying the good times as much as he could have, as much as he should have. And so that's the other thing is, like, if something's going good in your life, to notice it and just, be like, hey, like, pet a cat. Just be like, hey, you're not too bad. Like, I'm grateful for you. You're cool. Like, smile a little bit. So even though you're taking on all this responsibility and trying to Goggins shit and stuff and, go hard, also have that balance of, like, enjoy the aesthetic of things and kind of relax a little bit every now and then,
Goggins does not believe in that.
Dude, Goggins just goes hard.
He thinks you're pathetic. weekly.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, he's like, what are you doing stopping petting that cat? Give me 10 push-ups.
How much does that cat weigh?
How much do some the cat. But 12 Rules for Life, recommend it. And for just whoever's like listening to Peterson stuff, or if you don't know anything, that's a good self-help book. But you have to want to help yourself. That's the thing. With any of these self-help books, you have to want to help yourself. And then he also has to speak your language. Because if, it could not get to you. So.
At the beginning of Maps of Meaning, he explains that he grew up vaguely Christian. Grew up, in a Judeo-Christian context with parents who took him to church and stuff. Eventually, he was frustrated by how little they understood how to unify religion and science. He left. He went the other direction. Fuck the patriarchy, fuck the rich, fuck the church. And then he eventually settled in the middle and realized how to put religion in its context. And the first 5 pages of Maps of Meaning lays out that aspect of his story. And so he is such a good antidote to intellectuals like you who want to get to the heart of Christianity because that's his journey, because that's the story that he went through.
Totally.
And he can allow us to skip a lot of that process where we don't want to waste too much time where we become anti-church Christians or become like anti-religion intellectuals or like anything cringy like that just ends up being a waste of time. And it's just the pendulum swinging. We're like, man, the right's so stupid. Man, the left's so stupid. We don't want to just do that.
Yeah.
And so if you're an intellectual who wants to go deeper than your church is allowing you to go, you should stay at your church, read Jordan Peterson, and then be a leader in your church and help it become better.
And help integrate it. Integrate some stuff that's helped you.
Yeah.
To help others. Because that's, if you really want to help, that's the way to do it. Because, it's like I was saying earlier, like I could have all these thoughts and try to make some sort of leap to some sort of, like incredible change, like splitting the atom, but it's not going to happen.
And on the note of what you just said, like when I read 12 Rules for Life originally, or I guess maybe more broadly when I was first exposed to Jordan Peterson, I was much more anti-religious and more like closed off. I thought it was stupid, much more so. And I think that my exposure to Jordan Peterson plays a large role in my being more open to spirituality and like believing that there's a God, that there's a creator. And I think that's because he doesn't, when he speaks about like the same kind of things that that I think any good religion should be kind of preaching and trying to get people to do, he doesn't talk to them with using religion as evidence, like where a pastor might say you should do this because this biblical character did this.
Because it's the word of God.
Because God said so, because it's in the book and that is the truth. Yeah. Instead, it's like he's starting from here's the thing, here's why it's true, not relying on some self-proving proof of like a religion accepting everything that they say themselves.
Right. When you fall out of that, you have nothing. Yeah. Like all my values were proven by all my values, and now I disagree with the proofs, and now I disagree with the values. Now I have nothing.
Now I don't have all the values that I grew up with.
Yeah.
So I think if there's someone that like is thinks religion is stupid and is interested in potentially having some sort of spirituality in their life, I think Jordan Peterson is like a really good way 100%. To it. And it's a very good book. Yeah.
To kind of just wrap up, just a main thought that I got from this conversation is the idea that we need to focus more on looking within and helping others find God within, and somehow reaching that level of consciousness that you can find in TM and other similar stuff. Because I think you can find that through the philosophies of Jesus Christ, if you want to call it like that. But just I think there's something there, something interconnected between TM and Christ and Jordan Peterson and anything that makes you feel that way of like, hey, there's something to this.
Sure, absolutely.
And so it's just like I think figuring out how to focus on the individual and help improve the individual. Yeah. Because then it even goes to the politics on how bad areas are tough to get out of because everyone around you is bad. So it's like, but if we change that, then we can help improve. We can help raise the people out of it.
Right.
That's more political, yeah.
Right.
Totally.
Not that everyone around me was bad, but stuck in the bad cycle.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave you saying it that way because I know that's not what you meant.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah, they're stuck in the bad cycle. Yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. Yeah, not morally bad.
Yeah.
Maybe they're doing some morally bad things, but
Mm-hmm.
like they still have value as a human. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally.
We would love to have you back more.
I'm
Part
part
of the vision of the podcast was to encourage people to finish books. A lot of people read.
Yeah, I should finish.
But finish books and understand them well enough to be able to talk about them. And so it would bring us a lot of joy if you were finishing books and coming on here and talking about them.
I think that'd be a good encourager too, because like for me, like that's probably a motivator, which Goggins wouldn't like that either. He says people shouldn't be motivated; they should be driven.
Shut the fuck up, David.
I don't know. What does that mean?
That sounds like a sermon. Like,
He's a pastor.
it's not about the mind of Christ; it's about the heart of Christ.
Whoa!
Like, well, you made up the definitions of both of those words on your sermon. What are you?
That could be a good motivator, a good incentive though. Yeah, because like I started reading Brothers Karamazov, and I thought it was great, but like there was nothing chasing me to like finish it,
Right.
and there was nothing like where I was like, hey, when I finish it, this is the great reward that I'm gonna get. I know that I would get awesome stuff out of it just because the guys like the writing is really good, and so I know I would increase my knowledge of articulation and like vocabulary and stuff like that, and so that would help me think better.
Yeah.
But I can't see that. You know,
Yeah.
it's not tangible to me where I know, okay, this is. But versus if I'm like reading it and then I'm thinking, okay, I'm gonna have to talk to you guys about it.
Yep.
And be like, okay, I'm gonna talk to these guys about it. You know, that could be a good incentive. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely helpful in comprehending books better. It's like how Einstein said something like, if you can't explain something to a 5-year-old, then you don't even understand it yourself.
Yeah.
So like if you can read a book and not get any of it, and it does really help to be like knowing that you need to be able to explain it to someone.
And like Peterson says, like if you learn something, like if you're gonna teach someone it,
Yeah.
and then that'll help you learn it better.
Totally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's true. It's tough, man. It's tough because for me, it takes up a lot of my mental capacity. Like when I'm reading something and I'm like, okay, I'm gonna teach someone this, then I'm like really making sure I get it down.
Yeah.
Einstein was a slow learner for that reason. If you sat down to teach him something, he would say, please go slowly, I learn slowly. It's because he's actually learning. He's actually incorporating the knowledge into the rest of his worldview. He's not just preparing to regurgitate it. He's like, you need to give me time to put the pieces that you're giving me into the puzzle of the rest of my knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
So please go slowly. It does take more time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But it's way more efficient.
So I think for me, the struggle is going to be that I'm going to finish books a lot slower than you guys.
I doubt it.
But I think that it'll speed up.
We were every 2 weeks pretty consistently, but we haven't been consistently.
I think it'll speed up with time because I think I'll get like better at reading and like, comprehending stuff quicker and like picking up on like understanding how to read and stuff and like the habit and stuff.
Yeah.
And like start reading longer periods of time, you know, because I finished the 12 Verse for Life was like one of the first books I like finished. I would do like 10-15 minutes every morning when I woke up.
Nice.
And I did it for like maybe 4 months.
Nice.
Something like that.
So Peterson was asked how to efficiently read, and he said he didn't believe in any like speed reading or note-taking techniques. He just read in a way that he was incorporating when he was reading into his knowledge.
Yeah, that's what he said. And he said he said that he doesn't believe in highlighting or any of that.
No.
And that he
just
says
reads.
that after you read, to write down what you just read, to practice recall.
Oh, I never caught that.
Mm-hmm.
So he didn't. I misspoke. So it was highlighting and underlining that he didn't recommend.
Mm-hmm.
I said he didn't recommend note taking. I think that was incorrect.
Yeah, I guess not like notes in the traditional sense where you pause and then write it right next to it, but notes as in like you read it and then afterwards, okay, what did I just read? So that you can get a better picture and kind of store it better and then practice like pulling it out.
Right.
Which I would do that too but I found myself going over my time limit because I only had a certain amount of time because I was waking up before work. So then I would read and then I would end up recalling for like 30 minutes.
Yeah.
And so I was like, taking out from like a 10-minute reading session, like just writing like, okay, this is what I just read and this is what it makes me think of, but like basically using my own words to describe what I just read.
Yeah.
Which
that sounds great.
it was really good, but it took a good amount out of me, which I think I would increase in strength with time. But then it was also just a matter of poor planning, time-wise, because I would run out of time, and then eventually got to the point where I was like, okay, I don't have time to finish my thoughts, so I'm not going to do this. And so I stopped doing it. You know?
Yeah. You got to be the one to say it.
Night school.
Night school.
Night school.
Yeah.